Test. 1, 2, check. Test. 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, check. 2, check. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club's Best Bet Seminar. My name is Frank Scattoni, and I am joined each week by a special guest to discuss the best betting opportunities on Sunday's card. Just a reminder, this is not a traditional selection show. We're not going to talk about every race. We are just going to look at specific races and wagering strategies that offer the best opportunities to make a decent score. If you're watching live, feel free to leave us a comment or ask us any questions. If you can't catch us live, the show will also be archived on Del Mar's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube platforms. So let's get right to it. Let me introduce today's guest. You've seen his name on top of plenty of tournament leaderboards, and over the last year or so, he's gained quite the reputation as one of the best trip handicappers out there. Let's welcome Tyler Hoffman. Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Frank. Thanks for the warm introduction. It's good to be back. It's been a while since you and I have done one of these, so I'm really looking forward to it.
2019, I went back and looked at some of my old notes, and I remember we did it right here on track at the top of the turn up there, the Seaside Terrace or whatever it's called, and we talked about that Survivor tournament that you won many years ago, which is how you and I ended up meeting each other. It's been a long time since, though.
Over a decade, Frank. I'm sorry to make you feel old.
You don't have to make me feel old. I just feel old. It's okay. But it's good. It's good to have young handicappers on the show. I know you have such a passion for the game, and you've been around it a long time. And we've talked about that plenty of times before. But I want to get into the nitty gritty. I want to dive right into handicapping. I mentioned trip notes in the beginning of the little introduction. We'll talk about your proficiency doing trip notes and trip handicapping in a minute, but I know you're also a pretty darn good pace handicapper as well. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about your process / approach to handicapping, and what exactly are you looking for when you handicap a race?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's so many different facets to it, so I'll try to keep it linear for everyone. My dad is probably the best handicapper that I know. He taught me everything that I look at in a racing form. And he's been a speed handicapper. He was taught by his father. And, we've always said the one horse that doesn't get in trouble in the race is the one that has the lead. So that's one way to guarantee you're probably going to get your trip. Now, you may go too fast, and that won't help you out, obviously, because you'll tire late. But at least if you're in front, you've got a shot. So the first thing we look for in every single race is who is going to get the lead. Is there a pace advantage up front? So we're always looking to go wire to wire. Now at Del Mar specifically, that's kind of a double-edged sword because, as Leo last week, your guest mentioned, there is a bit of a track bias in play at Del Mar. The outside lanes tend to, sit better trips than those on the rail. Though this week has played a lot more fair, I would say.
I agree.
Opening week. But as kind of a general rule of thumb, and you'll see there's a theme to the selections today for the best bets, we're looking for horses that are forwardly placed and tracking, specifically in main track sprint races. When it comes to handicap and pace on the turf, a lot of it has to do with where the rails are at. When the rails are at 0, typically that favors horses coming from off the pace. At Del Mar for years, opening week with the rail at 0 feet, you rarely find horses that go wire to wire. Anybody that goes wire to wire or comes close are ones that I would upgrade their performances and look to bet back later in the meet, because the rails will be out when they run back the second time. So they already did with the rails at 0. That's generally a pretty good handicapping principle to follow. And we're seeing a little bit of that this week with the rail at 12 feet as speed is continuing to hold better and better. And the closers aren't quite at such a big advantage as they were opening week. We're not seeing horses flying down the center of the track like Flashiest in the Oceanside Stakes, stuff like that.
Yeah, they launched that slingshot move, and whereas opening week they keep the momentum going. Here we've seen a little bit of them flattening out a little bit, not having that same punch. So definitely important to pay attention to the rail settings. Definitely important to pay attention to any kind of track bias. It's always smart to look at the early races in the card, make some notes, see where the winners are coming from, see what the pace scenario was, see what the price of those horses. If the logical horses are winning and doing it the right way, you can't say there's a bias or anything. You need to really look into it and be smart about it.
Yeah, and when it comes to bias handicapping, I'm one that tends to steer to just a general trend. I don't like to, be so pronounced where it's like, this is the only thing that's happening, and
Sure.
this is the way it is. That's why I think it's really important to just kind of be familiar with the way the track is running and analyzing the horses that are going to be sitting those types of trips. You don't want to fall in love just because the horse has, as I mentioned earlier, the tactical outside tracking ability. The horse has shown no ability to finish. Just because he's going to sit the trip doesn't mean that the bias is really going to help him, because he's probably not that good anyway. So you have to use common sense and logic to it in order to make it fit.
Right. And the other thing is too, trainers are watching races, jockeys are watching and riding the races. Sometimes they pick up on things too, and sometimes you see them overcompensate. Like there was a race last week where on paper it was a turf race. It looked like there were 5, 6, or 7 speed horses, and it was setting up for someone off the pace. Well, of course, everybody grabbed.
Yep.
And they got the half in 49 and change, which was like the slowest half for all the turf races opening week, and the race was run completely differently than everybody expected. So
I thought we were watching a New York turf race.
There you go. Exactly. You're expecting to see the Ortiz brothers out there.
Like grab.
Right. Grab. But anyway, so the point is you kind of have to be fluid, right? You can't be so rigid and dogmatic in your handicapping. You got to be fluid. You kind of see what's going on and adjust accordingly.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about trip handicapping, because I know you've done tremendous work the last year or two, doing notes and watching races, watching every horse, and doing write-ups and whatnot. So tell us a little bit about that approach and what you've been up to with that.
Yeah, trip handicapping is something I've always done. Obviously, it wasn't anything publicly. It was just something for my dad and I. We both watched tape together and had discussed and talked about it. I did some work in the last year, and for the Del Mar meet, I wanted to have a little bit of fun this year, just for myself, really, because I was doing it anyway. So I created something called Hoffman's Replay Thoughts. It's just basically just going through identifying good and bad trips, not spending too much time on neutral trips. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I am selling those trip notes for $10 a card. You can just hit me up on Twitter, send me a DM. My handle's at the bottom, Ty Hoffman 6. I also have an email address, hoffmanllctrips@gmail.com. For anyone who wants to send me an email, wants to take a look at some trip notes, and basically just trying to cut down on the workload for others. Trip handicapping is a labor of love. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy the puzzle of it. I get excited going through a card and finding hidden stuff. A perfect example of that would be like the Mike Maker horse that won last week, Stage Ready. Stage Ready won his race at Churchill Downs last time, but the way that he won it, where he's skipping across the turf and he had such a miserable first half mile of that race. If I'm just handicapping the race normally, I'm really not looking at that horse all that much because he's coming from a claiming 20 at Churchill. But the fact he was moving up in class, I saw it. I had this trip note. All of a sudden now I was excited to find this little bit of a hidden gem that most people probably didn't upgrade. I think we got a square value on the board, 10, 11, and 1, something like that, with, Trevor McCarthy getting his first win down here. So things like that are what make trip note handicapping fun, but also frustrating, because you find stuff like that all the time and, they don't perform the way you want them to. So
sure,
you have to have a light touch with trip handicapping. It has to coincide and complement the other foundations of your principles. So for me, being a pace handicapper, I want my trip notes to coincide with my pace handicap. And if one of those don't align, I need to take a step back and say, okay, which one should I be following here? Because otherwise I just drive myself mad and say, oh, I had the trip note horse here. Oh, I had my pace horse here.
Right.
I can't play both sides of the fence. I got to take a stand at some point. That's the only way to make some money out here.
I know. I always say handicapping is sort of like information triage, right? You have to decide what's the most critical at that moment as you're going through the races, and how do you weigh all the different factors that you have, all the variables, right?
Yeah.
You have to weigh what's more important to you given a particular race.
I'd say, and I think one of the important things about trip handicapping, and for anyone that does it themselves, because again, this is trip handicapping has been done for a bazillion years before I was born, and it'll be done a bazillion years after I was born. I mean, computers and robots probably do it, instead of us having to do
AI
this.
trip handicappers.
Yeah, it'll get to that point. But there are 3 points that I want to hit on, and I think would be useful for everyone to kind of know and to learn from, because I think it's important to pass on that knowledge and to help others out, because everyone's going to have their own opinion on when they watch a replay. It's like workout reports. You can subscribe to 3 different guys, and they could see 3 different things. You got a C+ workout report from Andy Harrington. You got a B from Toby, and then you can have the handicappers report that has a C-, and you're like, man, this is the same horse that worked out. I have no idea. So those 3 points for trip handicapping I want to touch on. Maiden races. I think maiden races are probably the best types of horses to find for trip handicapping, because those horses are eligible to improve so quickly. And oftentimes you don't have a lot to beat in those main races. So if you find something hidden there, that's generally a very, very good angle. Number 2, horses with new equipment changes, blinkers on, blinkers off. Whether they did it in the race or they were doing it in their next start, you can see, oftentimes a runner that was very rank, let's say, and they removed the blinkers for this upcoming start. That's a big deal. The connections notice that. They're thinking maybe he wants to be able to see around, he was headstrong. Or it works in vice versa too, where, he's ranked with the blinkers and you're thinking second time out, now he'll be more relaxed. He knows what to do because he has the blinkers.
Right.
And then the third point, this is the point that I always stress to people about trip handicapping. In every single turf race that you find, you're going to find 4 or 5, if it's a big field, you're going to find multiple horses that had poor trips or ones that you excuses for. And it is really, really frustrating. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to run back to that same race the next time out. They could have had an ideal race flow that day. They could have been primed, for their best effort, and they got wasted by a bad trip. So turf handicapping in terms of trips can be very, very frustrating. Yesterday's race, it was race 6 on the card, was an option claiming 40,000. It's a 12-horse field. I gave out a radio play. Abigail, who was the other Jeff Mullins horse that did not fire in that race.
Yeah.
I had 5 trip notes in that race, including on the 21-1 winner, right, who got DQ'd. And it's like,
can't bet them all.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even use the horse. I wanted to, but I mean, at some point I had to make a call and I had to narrow down the race. It was frustrating, but I can openly admit that while I had a great trip note on him, that race was so wide open those turf races are so challenging, which is why, again, I think maiden races and horses with equipment changes, those are probably the 2 aspects of trip handicapping I would encourage newcomers to focus in on, and not fall in love so much with the option claiming 40s on the turf and stuff like that.
Right. No, that's great advice. And you mentioned that was a big full field in the turf race. Well, we've seen a lot of full fields this meet. The racing has been phenomenal at Del Mar. There's been a lot of opportunities, a lot of good prices. The payouts have been terrific. I think that trend should continue today. We both really liked Sunday's card. I know when we were talking beforehand, you said, I said, well, you can talk about any races you want. And you said you had trouble narrowing it down because there were so many good races to talk about today and so many interesting opportunities.
There are. It's going to cost me a fortune to bet today's card. I got to be honest. The bankroll is going to get extended, and outside of probably opening day's card of the first 6 days of the meet, this is my favorite card. There are so many different ways to bet and approach this card. I can't wait. It's what do we got? A little under 3 hours to first post.
Well, let's open up that wallet. Let's open up the form and let's dig in. I know the first race you wanted to talk about was race 4. It's an open $32,000 claimer contested at 6 furlongs on the main track. The morning line favorite is number 3, Major Cabby, at 3-1 for Peter Miller and Pratt. This is a horse who hasn't won a race since October 24th, 2019. And even though he's dropping in class, his recent form isn't anything special. And he's always done his best work around 2 turns. So I'm not surprised you picked this race to dive into a little bit.
Yeah, it's really funny because Major Cabby was entered in a race, I believe it was an option claiming 40, now winners of 1 other than, on opening day. It was 12-1 on the morning line, had a cozy outside draw, and at that price was probably one of my best bets on that card.
Right.
Mostly because of the trip note on that day, which is, it says wide trip in the form. And I got to give Michael Rona a shout out because it was hysterical. He commented around the far turn, this one covered more ground than Lewis and Clark. And he's absolutely right. I mean, you want to be wide at low south, but this was too wide. He was outside fence for 2 turns. And it was a big effort from him on that day.
Yeah, there are wide trips and there are wide trips.
Yes, this was too wide. Obviously, he's a player in here. I typically, as a general handicapper, like speed on a cutback, which is what he is. He has 2-turn speed and he's cutting back in distance. I wish he drew further outside. He's part of the mix, and he'll be part of my exacta. But he's not my top pick in here. My top pick goes to the outside, the number 9 runner for John Sadler, Buttered Noodles. And I like this horse for a couple reasons. And this fits both my pace handicapping and my trip note handicapping. My pace handicapping is at Del Mar, as I got to give Leo the shout out again because he's the first one to mention it. Outside tracking speed.
Yep.
This is what Buttered Noodles is going to do. If Buttered Noodles drew the 1 hole, he would not be my pick in here. But he drew the outside, the cozy draw on the outside. I see him ranging up out there and sitting the trip in here, riding the track profile. 8-1 on the morning line, I think, is a fantastic value for what we're seeing. Now let's go to the trip side of things. This one had always been forwardly placed except for the last race. The PP comment is belated improvement. Well, what's missing from the PP comment is the poor start.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did this horse end up so far back after showing speed in every one of his previous races?
Exactly. He bobbled and then was bumped and pitched out of his lane, which for a runner with his style basically eliminated him right from the start.
No shot.
The good thing was he was forced to do a new tactic and he had to relax, and he actually made a little bit of a run in here. This was actually a nice effort for a new tactic that will actually help him today because he's breaking on the far outside. He could go wire to wire in this field, but I think he could actually sit just a little bit off, which he probably learned from the effort last time. So there are two things that I like a lot about him. He's versatile, I think, in both aspects. The bad start last time, I think, helped to give a new dimension to him, which is really, really good. So at 8-1 on the morning line, our betting strategy in this race, obviously, we're going to have to analyze the odds board. We don't want him to get bet down too much, but assuming he stays somewhere around the morning line, it'll be a win bet on him. And then we're going to play exactas. We're going to key him on top to 3 horses underneath. The number 3 Major Cabbie, who we alluded to. The number 5 horse, Alexandros for trainer Jeff Mullins. Big workout report for Toby Terrell. The other speed in the race. I thought he had a very, very sharp win last time. It says he only won by a neck, but this is one of those races where you watch the tape. It was a measured neck. The place runner was never getting by him. He was actually kind of, coasting into the wire, so to speak. Obviously fits here. And then the number 8 California Street, who's a little bit of a price, freshened up on the outside for Umberto Rispoli. Again, cutting back in distance, which I like. Horses turning back. And this is a subtle handicapping on this one. Umberto Rispoli rode this horse last time, and then they make an equipment change, and Rispoli rides back again. Right. I don't have a statistical analysis on it, but it just seems like when the top jockeys stick with a horse for a second time and they make some sort of change, whether it be distance, equipment, something like that, that's generally a good thing. Those horses move up. So I think he's got a shot.
Yeah, it's possible Rispoli suggested adding blinkers.
Exactly.
And then he sticks around.
So we'll play exactas and tries with the 9 on top over those 3 horses for the try. And then we'll play what's called weighted exactas, meaning that we'll have a larger dollar amount on the exacta with number 9 butter noodles on top of the 3, 5, and 8. And then we'll reverse the exactas for a smaller amount with the 3, 5, and 8 on top of the 9. Right.
So what Tyler's saying out there is if you do just throwing numbers out, $20 exacta 9 with 3, 5, 8, and then maybe a $10 exacta 3, 5, 8 with 9. Something
exactly.
Like that.
Yeah. It's generally about half is the way that I would play it.
Right. And then you have a trifecta bet up there as well. I want to mention one thing because this was also something Leo and I talked about last week, and I think has proven to be worthwhile to pay attention to: the ship and win bonuses.
Yes.
And number 9 is eligible for a ship and win bonus. So is Alessandros and even a couple of others in here as well. But of the ship and win horses, I really like what you said about number 9 butter noodles. And also, as I was just kind of looking at the form here, if you look back to that May 14th race, not too far off a horse named PR Radio Star. Wasn't that a pretty good horse out here for a little bit?
Oh, he absolutely was.
Yeah, I think it was a mono horse, a little red feather, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, won a bunch of races out here. So there's some good form. There's some good form in there. So that's race 4. Let's move on to the 7th race. It's the $80,000 Daisy Cutter. It's a 5-furlong turf affair for the ladies with the rails set at 12 feet. Morning line favorite is number 5, Superstition, at 5-2 for the Mandela Barn. And again, with that jock up there, Flavian Pratt, rides a lot of morning line favorites. There's no denying that this is a nice horse, Superstition. But she likes to be forwardly placed in a race that seems to have a lot of other speed. So maybe is that kind of why you ended up on the horse that you like? Yeah.
Again, setting up the pace handicapping here, there are 3 dedicated speeds in here. The Rail Runner for Peter Miller, Bulletproof 1. One of the 3 Sadler entrants, number 7, 5 picks, please. And then the other Sadler entrant, Bruja Escalarte, on the outside with Tyler Bays. Now, Sadler has 3 horses in here. 2 of them are dedicated speeds. It's kind of hard to believe 2 of them are going to be all out, gunning like crazy to get there. But I still see a contentious pace battle up there. So with that said, I was looking for somebody a little bit off the pace and somebody who I thought was coming to a race in here. 5-furlong turf sprints, traditionally, I'm looking for 2 things. Someone with a pace advantage to go wire to wire, or someone to sit the pocket trip. I went with somebody that is, I shouldn't say, pocket trip. I don't know if she eventually gets this race, but she will be running on here, and I'm hoping she saves the ground. We'll leave it at that. If she's super sharp, she will sit the pocket trip in here. And that is the number 2, Curel, the other Peter Miller entrant. So for those of you looking at the form right now, she returned off a long layoff last time in the Grade 3 Wilshire. And that was nothing but a prep race. It's subtle. If you're watching the tape, you can kind of figure it out by watching the jockey's motion, the way he rode her throughout. He kind of let her do her own thing, and he didn't even really ask till the quarter pole. Let her finish up on her own. This one's a stone cold sprinter. There's no doubt in my mind that Peter Miller was probably using the Wilshire Stakes as a prep for the cutback to today's sprint distance. At the 5 furlong distance, she's got 3 wins in 3 seconds from 6 starts. She likes the Del Mar surface. She's got a win, a second, and a third here. She's 6-1 on the morning line. So my only hesitancy with using her is I am worried she's going to get shuffled and might be a little bit too far back. But I think she's going to come to a race. I think we're going to score value on her. She's got a great workout report, which I always like to see when I have an inkling that something was a prep. If the workouts are improving off of what I think was the prep on tape, generally a good sign that I'm probably not too far off on my rationale. So
right.
Similar to our approach in race 4, we're gonna play a win bet on Currell, assuming we get somewhere near the morning line. We'll play weighted exactas in here with 3 runners. The Peter Miller entrant on the rail, Bulletproof One, who again might be able to clear off from the other speeds because she has the inside post draws, which might be able to hold the rail. The number 5 Superstition, who I think is honest as can be. That's one who probably would land in the pocket, at least the first pocket, in behind the other speeds. I trust Flavian Pratt to put her in the right spot. She loves Del Mar. I can't hold the last race, the Monrovia, against her really at all. She was in chase mode to a very sharp filly in Venetian Harbor, who ran arguably one of the most impressive turf sprints at Santa Anita for that entire 6-month meet. So she's obviously very, very logical in here. And then Rakoss on the outside for trainer Philip Diamano and his stepdaughter Jessica Pfeiffer. She's a hard trying sort. She likes Del Mar as well. Obviously, Philip's off to a little bit of a slow start this meet. I think he's about 0-12 right now. But anytime Jess rides for him, they're obviously trying very, very, very hard. She's also one that'll be forwardly placed, but in behind the speed. So we'll key the 2 over the 159 with heavy exactas with the 2 on top. We'll reverse them. And then we're also going to play a daily double, which is another bet that I like playing a lot of since I like the next race a lot. So we'll play the 2 with the 7 and the 8, and we'll get to analysis on why I like the 7 and the 8 when we get to race 8.
Yeah, we'll talk about that race in a second. I just want to mention one thing because a couple of people left some comments, and thank you for that. Obviously, it's hard for us to check the late scratches while we're doing the seminar, but someone mentioned that the 8 California Street is scratched in the previous race. So after this is over, I'll have Tyler rework his bets for that race, and I'll post it on Twitter at Scatoni Sure Shot. So don't worry about that. We'll get a replacement for that, or maybe not. Maybe Tyler doesn't like anybody else, and we'll just play exactas with the ones that he likes.
We'll just play bigger exactas, maybe.
Well, exactly. But before we do move on to the next race, I do want to talk about handicapping these turf sprints a little bit, because you and I, before we got on this live stream, talked about how different it's been handicapping the new 6 and 6.5 furlong turf sprints at Santa Anita, as compared to this completely different animal, this 5 furlong turf sprint here at Del Mar. And I know you talked about your approach a little bit towards the 5 furlong sprint races, but just give an overview of just approaching turf sprints in general, because they are a completely unique animal.
Yeah, I'm gonna be brutally honest about the Santa Anita 6 and 6.5 turf sprints. I struggle with them. I never was good at them the entire 6 months. My dad and I have handicapped those races every which way. We try to find consistency and patterns, and I don't think we ever figured it out. We were relieved when Del Mar started, so we go back to traditional 5 furlong turf sprints, and there's no dirt crossing, because
right.
I think the dirt crossing is what threw us off, and I think a lot of it has to do with trying to analyze the pace, because we could never figure it out. We had talked earlier offline, Frank, you and I, about it seemed like some jockeys weren't gunning across the dirt. They were maybe riding a little bit, more cautiously.
Sure.
And who could blame them? Because you're going turf to dirt to turf in a full out sprint at 40 miles an hour. So that's can't be comfortable for the jocks. Not that it's unsafe or anything. I mean, I commend Santa Anita for doing it. I think it's unique. I love the aspect of what they accomplished, and they got big field sizes in those races. I just struggled with them. So I think it really comes down to horses that like specific distances in turf sprint handicapping and enjoy the track surface.
Right, so, there's a horse in the race we're talking about who just absolutely freaked when they went to the different turf sprint distance. She couldn't win any time else, but she started running 6.5, freaked.
Yeah. She absolutely relished it. I bet her every single time. It's probably the only winner I had in 6 months at that distance was her. But yeah, I mean, her horse like her, Canderel for the Richard Mandela barn was another one that loved that Santa Anita 6.5. I wouldn't like Canderel at 5 furlongs turf sprinting at Del Mar if Papa Mandela entered her in a spot like that, which is why I don't like Constantia here. I think it's too short. And I think she's a specialist for. I think they're both specialists for turf sprinting at Santa Anita. So yeah, I mean, it's really. I think it's as simple as that. And the further you go in turf sprints, so you go 6 furlongs, 6.5. Obviously on the East Coast they have 7 furlong turf sprints. I want horses cutting back in distance that are a little bit fitter, versus the 5 furlong turf sprints. I don't really care about the fitness that much because most horses, even off a long layoff, can get there in 5 furlongs. They can last that much. It's anything beyond.
You can even be a little bit of a short horse and still win at 5 furlongs.
Exactly.
So, but I agree with you. That cutback from a mile, showing speed in a mile, cutting back to 6.5 on the turf at Santa Anita was a very good angle, and that's a good angle on dirt too. I mean, it's just anytime you have a horse who has bottom and speed cutting back, horses usually run really well. So
yeah. And I have to mention it, Frank. Please, Santa Anita, bring back the 6.5 down the hill.
I think a lot of people would like to see that, me included. So, all right. Well, that's enough about turf sprints. The point is, no turf sprint is created equally. So you have to, move and figure out. Yes, you have to adapt to what you're being given. So, all right. Well, let's move to race 8 because Tyler wants to be closing out a double here from race 7 to race 8. It's a 62.5 optional claimer. Non-winners are 2 contested at 6.5 furlongs on the main track. Morning line favorite is number 7, Colt Fiction at 5-2. Very Honest Calbred is in very solid form right now, but doesn't necessarily look any better to me than a bunch of the others in what I thought was a pretty competitive race where, in my opinion, I'm going to let the tote board kind of dictate where I go because I do think several of these can win. But I do like the fact that Colt Fiction is drawn outside, giving him a little bit of an advantage if the track continues to play the way we've talked about. But how do you see it?
I agree in everything you just said, Frank. I think that the post positions pretty much dictate the bet in here. This is a very competitive, contentious field. The pace should be contentious. Canadian Pride and How Be It, I think, drew tough posts in here. I think they're both sharp. I can't hold Canadian Pride's last race against him. Lost a very talented 3-year-old on his comeback try in Dr. Shivel. How Be It, I said you have to upgrade that performance last time, even though he ran with what I consider the track profile at Santa Anita, which inside speed was pretty consistently good for the entire 6-month meet. I thought that was a big performance. And obviously, Flavin Pratt hopping aboard today's positive. Little Red Feather loves to win down here at Del Mar. It doesn't matter if there's no fans like last year or 40,000 fans. A Little Red Feather's got a shot in the stretch. They got who their horse is.
Yeah, there's cheering.
But they drew tough posts. They drew the inside at 6.5, which I think is a disadvantage with the general trend of the track profile, which is why I went to the outside post positions with Cold Fiction and Fashionably Fast. Just to show how fluid I would feel about it, if you reverse the post positions for How Be It and Canadian Pride, and you put them on the outside, and you put Cold Fiction and Fashionably Fast on the inside, they would be my picks in this race.
Flip flop, yeah, exactly.
This is literally a post position game from a tactical, forwardly placed trip.
Yeah, because all of these horses are pretty evenly matched.
And I think if you ran this race 10 times and you flip flop positions, you'd have different winners almost every single time.
Right.
I think they're very, very competitively and evenly matched out here. So that's why I went to Cold Fiction and Fashionably Fast to finish my double from race 7. And then my win bet in here would be on Fashionably Fast on the outside. I like him a little bit more than I like Cold Fiction for a couple reasons. One, they come out of the same race in which Brickyard ride wire to wire. There was nobody else to go challenge Brickyard that day. It was kind of now or never time. Brickyard had kind of gone south after running so well earlier in the meet, obviously winning the Grade 2 San Carlos, and then went south for a little bit. But that was his comeback trying the Thor's Echo, and he did what he was supposed to do that day. I thought Fashionably Fast had a little bit of a tougher trip in comparison to Cold Fiction. Cold Fiction got to save a little bit of ground, got to stay towards the inside of the track, ran with the profile a little bit more than Fashionably Fast did. It's ironic, the difference between Santa Anita and Del Mar. If you sat the 3 or 4 wide tracking trip in dirt sprint to Santa Anita, that was not what you wanted.
No shot.
That's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So Fashionably Fast is going to run the same race he did last time, but this time it'll be with the profile, I think. He obviously loves Del Mar. He's got 3 wins here and 6 starts in the second. The distance is ideal. He's 2 for 3 at the distance with a third. Training well, so I think all systems are a go for Fashionably Fast. So I'm going to box them together in an exacta. If I got 4-1, I'd probably take the win bet on Fashionably Fast. Anything shorter than that, I probably wouldn't advise the win bet just because I don't think it's worth it. I'd probably play heavier doubles or heavier exactas with him on top at that point. And then the last bet that I would do in this race, because again, my main bets are win bets, exactas, doubles, and pick fives. It's pretty much all I play. I don't really touch anything else. And my win bet is as a general rule of thumb, I really don't take anything shorter than 4-1. The late odds hits from, we'll say, the computer players. Yeah. Obviously, for a small bettor like myself, because if I have 9-1 in the gate and I only got 5-1 at the wire, that's a big deal on a $20 win bet.
That's huge.
So
eats away from your profit.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to the double. So if I lost the win bet, I'd probably make a bigger incremental wager on my daily double here, which would be the 8. Fashion Me Fast, who's my key in this race, to the 2 and the 5 next race.
Excellent. All right, well, we're going to wrap up with one more race, race 9. It is a fine renewal of the $150,000 California Dreamin'. It's an 8.5 furlong turf affair for Calbreds with the rails at 12 feet. The morning line favorite is parked all the way on the outside, number 10, North County Guy, at a tepid 7-2. Very honest horse, cool horse, but I think you have to take him on considering the draw. I analyzed this race for Del Mar's online contest, and I think Tyler and I landed on the same horse, but I'll let him tell you why we like a certain horse.
I've never felt more confident when I read that analysis this morning. I went, oh, good. I'm not crazy here. Frank, when you and I aligned, generally speaking, we've done very, very well.
We
specifically
do okay,
in the race of the day. We've had a lot of fun with it. And thankfully for you, Acclimates never seems to be in that race over there. For those of you who don't know the story with Acclimate, Frank and I had a discussion last year about, or I think it was 2 years ago now, if Acclimate could get the distance. And I said, it's lone speed. He won't know any difference. He'll just keep going. He goes, I don't know. And Acclimate went wire to wire, so I get to have a little fun with Frank. So now every time
Tyler 1, Frank 0.
I get to bring it up. But in this race, we land on the same top pick here, which is the number 2 Wound Tight. Multiple reasons to like this horse. This is probably, of all the bets I'm giving out today, this would be probably either 1 or 1A, depending on what his final odds end up being. Last time, notice I mentioned a horse, Canderel, who's I think a turf sprint specialist that's standing over those 6 and 6.5. Races, came flying at the end from last to first to win down the center of the track. This is nothing but a prep for Wound Tight for today's stretch out. And I thought the performance was one you should upgrade anyway because he was ranked for much of this race. And it's not really noted in the PPs at all, in PP comment, I should say. And the fact this one stuck around so well, only losing this race by a length and 3/4, despite all the wasted energy early, is a great sign. Should be fitter second off the layoff, returns to a track that he loves. 2 of his 4 wins come here. He's never missed the board at Del Mar. And I see him sitting in a beautiful pocket trip in here. And he could get the lead, don't get me wrong. And I'm not opposed. I'm never opposed when I got a horse that ends up on the lead that I thought was going to sit a pocket. That sometimes is the best kind of thing to happen. Like Lieutenant Dan on Friday would be a perfect example for Steve Miotti. Didn't think he was speed in that race, but the fact he got the lead was just how sharp he was off the layoff. That race was pretty much over a quarter mile into the race. Nice so anyway, Kent Storm was riding as well as any jockey out here. So I absolutely love Wound Tight today. I think he's going to run a big race in here for trainer Bob Hess, who's off to a cold start, but I think this will make him feel better and build a little momentum into week 3 of the meet. In terms of other bets in here, I'm going to play exactas again. I'm going to play weighted exactas with 2 runners in here. Number 5, Indian Peak for trainer Peter Miller. And number 9, Brando the Bartender, who I know holds a special place in your heart, Frank.
Brando. What a cool horse.
He is so cool. He's so consistent. He's so game. I don't know that I'm on 16th. I agree with your analysis, Frank. I don't know that this is his best distance. But the fact Rispoli took him over Galilean, who I think will probably go off, probably the favorite in here. I would think he's the defending champ in this race. So I don't think it'll be a big.
I was a little surprised at the 4-1 morning line. I
think he's probably 5-2. Yeah, probably at post time 2-1, something like that. But I thought the fact Rispoli took Brando the Bartender is kind of what tipped me off to keying him in the second hole for my exactas and tries. Because I do like him.
And he fires every time too. So,
he does. You know. He really does. He's as consistent as can be. He's a really cool horse to own, and the connections must be having so much fun. I think you said they've cashed 27 or 28 checks or something.
Yeah, since the ownership group claimed Brando the Bartender, I believe 28 races, cashed in 27 of them. I mean, can you ask for anything more from a horse like that? It's just incredible. What an awesome horse. He is. So I want to touch on Indian Peak here, but I want to get through the rest of my bets here real quick. Yes. So the other bets I'm going to make in the race, besides the exactas, with heavier with number 2 Wound Tight on top of number 5 Indian Peak and number 9 Brando the Bartender, smaller reverses, again weighted exactas, is also my tries. I'm going to play weighted tries in this race because I think there's some opportunity for some big value with another trip horse that I found in here.
So we'll play the 2 over the 5-9 over the 1, 4, 5, 7, 9, and then we'll reverse the top 2 spots. We'll put wound tight in the second hole in case he gets run down, and still have that trifecta as well. So Indian Peak, the number 5, who's kind of my second key in the race, and probably my second pick for trainer Peter Miller and Flavion Pratt. I did not like this horse initially the first time I handicapped the race. And then I started looking more and more, because the one thing you have to know about trainer Peter Miller is that he is always making changes. He takes a horse, it will be change in surface, change in distance, change in equipment, change in jockey. There's all sorts of different things that are always changing. He's always mixing it up. This one's obviously a first-time gelding today, and Flavion Pratt hops aboard. My initial instinct was, why would Pratt pick this horse?
Right.
Then I started looking back, and I go, okay, if I just focus on the turf races and eliminate everything else, not that he's a bad synthetic horse, but just since today's race is on turf, let me analyze the turf. Why did he pick this spot? He absolutely fits in this race. Last year, back in San Diego, when he started running on the turf there, he ran a good second to Margot's Boy. Then won the Snow Chief with a great ride from Smith. I hated Smith's ride in the La Jolla Stakes. I didn't want him on the lead. I wanted him off, and he wouldn't even have lead going into the first turn, if I remember. And then he made it, a middle move, Mike move, which a lot of us aren't fans of. But it was a race I would think Mike would be comfortable admitting it probably wasn't his best ride.
Right.
In the Turf Classic with Joel, I loved him that day. I made a big bet, and he just had a terrible trip. He was way further back than he should have been. The pace was kind of fake fast that day and ran into traffic.
Yep.
And then the next time again ended up with another middle move on February 13th, which again I can excuse that performance. And we've never gone back to the turf until today. We go to Miller, we get the gelding, and Pratt takes aboard. He has the back class to fit in this race, and at 8-1 on the morning line is kind of one of those sneaky horses in here that I would advise using in pick 5 wagers. And I'll be playing probably a heavier 2-5 exactas than I will 2-9 with Brando the bartender, as I weight even my weighted exactas in this race.
That's a great analysis. I like the way you just got into the nitty gritty to show how this is what we call dirty form, right?
Yes.
You can basically find excuses for a lot of the subpar performances. And I like what you said about Miller making changes. How many times do you see him reinvent a horse? Like he'll get a horse from back east who was running 2 turns and then turn him into the sharpest turf sprinter out here. It happens a lot. So
exactly. And then I'd be remiss not to mention why I wanted to play trifectas, which is specifically to include the number 4 Secret Club for trainer Sean McCarthy, who's 30-1 on the morning line. Don't like him on top to win this race really in the second hole. But his trip last time was just so unlucky and absolutely miserable. Obviously they're shooting the moon today. It's a big acid test. Should be far back, but I definitely think could pick up one of the minor pieces and perhaps make this trifecta really, really fun to win. At a big bomb, especially if we get Indian Peak and Brando to run underneath wound tight. It could be boxcars here in the 9th race.
Yeah, this is some great stuff. There's some really good prices in here. Tyler and I will convene after this live stream, and I'll go ahead and post his picks on my Twitter feed, and I'm sure he will do as well, or at least retweet what I do, so you guys can go back and check that out. If you missed the first part of the live stream, it'll be archived on the Del Mar Facebook, Twitter pages, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I just want to get to a comment real quick. I don't know if you have an answer to this question, but let me just put this up here. One of our listeners wanted to ask, who will win the Classic this year? Any early opinions?
Oh, man.
Who do you think the top handicap horse is out here?
God, that is a great question.
It's a tough question.
Because what you don't know at this time of year is who from back east is going to ship in for it. Because no one's committed yet. And a lot of it has to do with they will enter horses in both the Travers and the Classics. I don't know if they run the same weekend this year or they're 1 week apart, but weather dictates so much up there at Saratoga. But I will ask you this.
God.
I was going to say, Hot Rod Charlie's one that if they do take a shot in the Classic, I traditionally don't like 3-year-olds.
Yeah, but he'd have a big shot.
But I'm not convinced on the older horses to this point. So he's one I think will be in the mix if he runs, because he runs this race every time. I don't like the fact that he tends to hang a little bit. I don't know if that's a distance limitation. But his Belmont Stakes was awesome. He doesn't even have enough credit for that effort.
Yeah, all of his recent races have been awesome. I mean, he's been terrific. So what about any of the horses out of the San Diego? Express Train or Triple E?
Express Train loves Del Mar. I mean, you can't fault him. My biggest issue with Express Train is that every time I fall in love with him, he runs a dud.
I think a mile and a quarter. I think he's a little flat at a mile and a quarter. I think that's part of the problem, which is weird because he's this big lump. He's athletic, but he's also like big and long striding. So
Yeah.
it seems like 1.25 miles would be no problem, but his best races haven't come at that distance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Royal Ship will probably take a shot in there.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know what to do with Royal Ship anymore. I'm kind of disappointed that he didn't win the San Diego. I thought he was a pretty good bet.
Should have, yeah.
Rushy disappointed me the most. I don't
Inside
know what
though.
to do with Rushy.
Horse was inside.
That's the only excuse we can give him.
Halfway around the backstretch, I knew he had
Yeah.
no shot because he was just
Yeah.
spinning his wheels. But we've got the Zamboni going here cleaning the paddock, so we're a little noisy. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching and listening. I want to thank Tyler so much for joining us, giving us great insight. Again, follow me at Scatoni Sure Shot, and I'll go ahead and post Tyler's plays for today. Try and make some money. Good luck to us, and let's make some money. See you all next Sunday. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.